this video, we're going to take a look at evaluation, another one of our key exam skills, and we're going to try and give you a really simple structure that you can use in conclusions to try and maximize the marks you get for evaluation in your exam answers. And let's be honest, evaluation is a skill that many students find difficult, and one of the most common bits of feedback for students to get on their answers is that their answer was good, it was strong, but their conclusions let them down. So in this video, we're going to try and help you eradicate some of the problems you might be having with conclusions. First of all, we should say at the beginning that we in our exam answers are trying to score marks for a skill known as evaluation, showing judgments, reaching verdicts, coming to conclusions, decisions. Now, we don't have to do that just at the end of our answer. We can be picking up evaluation marks actually throughout the different stages of our answers. And so many students leave trying to accumulate marks for evaluation until a final paragraph, until a conclusion at the end of their answer. But really, what we should be trying to do is to show evaluation throughout, to really knock the examiner out with our evaluation and to put it periodically through our answer. So one little tip we can give you is to try and evaluate at the end of each of your points, at the end of each of your paragraphs. So as you've given a point to kind of set out one side of the argument, and you've given a nice chain of analysis there in order to try and elaborate on that point, we should try and draw that point, that idea, back to the question at the end of the paragraph and evaluate, show judgment. Why is that point important? What does it tell us? What does it mean? Why is it significant? Why is that point more important than something else? Where is its value? What is that point going to mean in the long run, in the short run? Try and show that examiner some judgment, some evaluation as we're going through our answer and not just leave it all until the end. However, we are still going to want to write a conclusion. Students are probably going to want a real strong paragraph at the end where they're trying to pick up many of their evaluation marks. Now, let's talk you through a little structure. You've got to start your conclusions off by answering the question. It's got to be your default position. It's got to be the place that you visit first. If we're asked a question in the exam and we've said, well, on the one hand, here's some important point to answer the question. Here's a counterpoint, a different point of view. We start our conclusion off by saying, right, here's what we think, here's our idea, here's what we agree with, here's our verdict. We've got to start off with a statement. Right? But then once we've given that statement, we want to try and back it up. We don't just want to throw it out there and say, there you go, there's our statement, we're done, thank you, good night. We've got to try and back it up. We've got to justify it. We've got to try and validate it. We've got to try and offer some context as to why we've reached that verdict. So let's take a sample exam question here. Is price the most important element of the marketing mix to all businesses during a recession? And then it's prompting us to justify our view. So we'd want to start our conclusion off by saying what our judgment is. What is our verdict? Is price the most important element of the marketing mix for all businesses during recessions, or is it not? Now, we really could go either way on that, depending on what we've written in our earlier points and which one we feel is the stronger side of the argument. But let's imagine that we were going to go with our judgment and we were going to go with no. Price is not the most important element of the marketing mix to all businesses during a recession. That's great. We'll put that out there. We've shown that we've reached a judgment, but what's more important is then our validation of it, our justification. Why have we reached that conclusion? So let's imagine that we decided to justify it by saying, well, the reason why I'm going to offer the conclusion that not all businesses will have price as the most important element of their marketing mix, even during recessions, is because businesses find themselves in different markets. That's my justification. There we go. That's why I'm backing it up. Businesses find themselves in different markets. Some will find themselves in very competitive marketplaces where price is the key element of the marketing mix, particularly in recessions. But not all businesses find themselves in those kind of markets. Some might find themselves in oligopolies where competition, maybe even during recessions, is on non-price factors such as promotions. Some businesses may even find themselves in a monopoly, may even find themselves in a pure monopoly where there's no other firms producing in that marketplace. And for them, even during recessions, price is not the most important element of the marketing mix because consumers don't have choice. So there you go, I've backed it up, I've justified it. I don't think price is the most important element in the marketing mix, even during recessions, and I've backed it up. My reason for reaching that verdict is because not all businesses find themselves in the same type of market. And that's where we'll really start to pick up some nice marks for evaluation there, because we're justifying what we believe. Now, let's be a little bit greedy. If the clock is kind to us in our exams, if we find that we've got time on our side, it might be nice to try and add in a second justification of our conclusion as well. It might be nice if we've got a second reason to back up why we believe what we've concluded. Now, if the clock is our enemy and if we are running out of time, it's perhaps more important to make sure that we have got full answers for every single question on the paper rather than concentrating on a second justification in a conclusion. But if we do have time to spare, rather than pouring yourself a martini and lighting yourself up a cigar and celebrating that you've reached the end of the exam, a second justification in a conclusion is only going to strengthen it. So for our question, maybe we could talk about branding and saying, well, a second reason why I've concluded that price isn't the most important element is because businesses have different strengths of brands in their portfolios. For businesses that find themselves with products that don't have a particularly strong brand name, then maybe, yes, price becomes incredibly important to them during recessions, but some businesses might find they have products that are a little more insulated against the impacts of a recession because of the strength of brand name that their product has accumulated. And so that's my second justification as to why price is not the most important element for all businesses, because some businesses have got products with really strong brand names. So if we can, we'd squeeze in that second justification. That's only going to make our conclusion even more wholesome, even more convincing. Another little tip for you is that we might want to try, if we've got time, to finish our conclusions with something a little bit more considered, something that adds a little bit more perspective to our conclusion. Because it's fine to have our opinion, it's fine to justify, and it's fine to say that that's what we believe, but any conclusion is going to be based on certain scenarios being true, on certain circumstances remaining constant. So it might be nice at the end of our conclusions to say, well, that's what I believe and I've backed it up. However, if this were to occur, or if this were to change, this might just have an impact on the validity of my conclusion. It may even mean that my conclusion's no longer quite as valid. For example, with the question that we've got up here about recessions, we've said no, price is not the most important element for all businesses. However, that might just depend on the length of the recession that we experience. If a recession's fairly short, then lots of businesses may be able to find that they're able to ride out the effects of that recession without having to put price to the fore in their marketing mix, particularly if they've got a strong brand name, particularly if they're in oligopolies or monopolies. But if a recession is particularly long, particularly deep, maybe one that lasts 18 months, 2 years longer, even firms that have strong brand names might need to start focusing on price a little bit more. Even firms in oligopolies might need to start focusing on price even more. So maybe the length of a recession might just make me think about how valid my conclusion is. And just showing that little extra bit of perspective there, just saying that, there are circumstances that might make my conclusion more or less valid, is just showing the examiner a little bit more reasoning and a little bit more thought into that conclusion. So there's our little rundown for you. This would be a nice simple structure to try and use in our conclusions to maximize those evaluation marks. Start off by answering the question, show some judgment, say what you think. Then we've got to back it up. Then we've got to justify it. We must have a reason why we believe what we believe. If time is on our side and we'll enjoy the martinis later, we'll squeeze in that justification for a second time, if we can think of a second point to back it up. And a nice little context at the end. However, my conclusion does depend on this being true or this being the case, shows that little bit extra perspective. So hopefully you found that useful. Might just give you a little structure that you can try and apply to your own essay questions. We'll see you next time for some more business tutorials.